Hello, hello! I am an artist. I've taken classes and done lots of practice, but I'm not what you might call the most disciplined. I hate rulers and math and sitting down to hammer out every single step the slow, correct way. If I can make every block fit into the square hole, what's the problem? Well, no. Things tend to be done a right way for a reason, and I'm very sad to report that the times I've been forced to do things the right way, I tend to get pretty good results. Tragic. So, let's get into it. I'm working on a story about a cursed pirate school, the full legal name being Gomla Academy for Pirates, but I usually just call it Gomla. The story calls for some homebrew beasties in desperate need of a good study, and you, gentle viewer, are here to keep me accountable. I wanted there to be sea demons in my story, with one in particular being a very important character, Viktor. So, I scribbled him in the back of my notebook literally one time, and then just ran with the first design. Badente. I don't think it's the worst character design ever, but this sort of approach is a huge part of why I'm revamping the comic. For this time around, I decided to start in my sketchbook. I find that I can be a lot more loose with my lines on physical paper, and I really just wanted to focus on silhouettes and vibes. Perhaps my biggest complaint with the original sea demon design is I feel it reads too much like a normal human. While I want sea demons to be humanoid-ish, I really want a more interesting silhouette to show that they are ocean monster-y guys. This is why I'm using a highlighter. You can definitely tell I'm feeling stiff and still way too boxed in by my original design, so I really had to push myself to get outside of it. Finally, I scribbled down a version where the frills go all the way down on both sides like a lion's mane. I finally felt comfortably warmed up, and so I went to digital. I took it slow. I figured out proportions and roughly blocked in shades so that I could figure out where and how patterning would be placed all across his lanky body. I really love the idea of his face completely splitting in half when he opens his jaw all the way. And then it was time to properly figure out how the cool back fins work. I came up with two ideas. I actually think I'll keep both as subtle variations that appear across the species as a whole, but specifically for Viktor, I like the look of the second version more. It was definitely a moment where I was very happy I was giving myself the freedom to explore different options instead of just rushing and marrying myself to the first choices I make. All of this leading up to now was me keeping a purposeful distance from tailoring anything too close to the character Viktor specifically. I wanted to get a feel for sea demons in general first, and then hone in on what would make Viktor Viktor. For one, he's a very abnormal sea demon in that he spends most of his time out of the ocean to help with the running of Gomla. He's Captain First Mate, literally the right-hand man to the head captain who runs the whole place. So he's spending a lot of time in dry air where he's very much not designed to live. First order of business is his breathing apparatus. It's a very important part of his character that I wanted to be sure I had down before anything else, but I was really stumped. In his original design, I literally just put a glass vase around his neck with a huge lock. Looks very clunky and not practical or cool at all. I can do better. My first bit of inspiration came from old school diving suits with the bronzed medals and bolts, but that still left me really stumped of how I was actually going to keep the water up around his gills without restricting him too much. He's fairly active, he moves around and is dealing with children all day, so I don't want him to feel like he's in a literal neck brace all the time. I was having so much trouble, I took a break from this problem to figure out how clothes would fit on him. Gotta keep decency if you work at a school after all. And then I came back to the collar and asked a friend for help, and they sent me a bunch of examples of fishy guys out of water, including these. Boom. Perfect. In the end, Viktor has two types of water apparati. The one with the diving suit collar comes with extra canisters, so that water can actively be circulated and provide fresher oxygen, and is way more resistant to damage. This is what he would wear in battle or anywhere that he doesn't want to risk his collar shattering. In my head, he's at the point where he can keep some breath on land for a short period of time. He won't just immediately start suffocating, but it would cause him to immediately need to retreat to the water. The other is just the leather and glass that wraps around his neck, a lot more flexible and relatively comfortable, but not as protected for more casual everyday wear. The oxygen that flows through this collar is also a lot less fresh. I think the best way to describe the difference in quality is, you know how if you lay under a blanket, the air gets stuffy and not as good, but technically you can still breathe just fine and could continue to do so for whatever length of time? That's what wearing the everyday collar is like, because there's not as much circulation. Meanwhile, the battle collar gives him fresher oxygen so that he can better concentrate, but is bulky and uncomfortable. Beyond that, it was a lot of other small details. I figured Viktor's spine isn't actually designed to have all of his vertebrae stacked on top of each other under the weight of constant gravity, and so he gets a corset to help with that. I figured out how it would lace over his frills, some expressions, messed around with maybe giving him some glasses because his eyes are definitely not used to just being in sunlight all the time, and a bit of a height chart. Thinking about all of these little practical details really helped with the design process. Now that I have all of that figured out, I can finally get to the good part, drawing Viktor proper. My first goal was to draw him with 2 other pirate captains that he spends a lot of time with in story. It felt important for me to establish how they all look together, and this is when I decided on Viktor's colors. I didn't color their clothes or anything because my primary intent was to be sure their colors and designs went well together, regardless of any accessories. To practice some more, I redrew the very first sketch I made of Viktor interacting with one of the captains. These two have an especially important relationship, and so making sure I could capture them together is also just as important. It's also heavily about making sure I can properly render Viktor in the style I intend to use in the comic, to be sure his design is doable. Because of this, I chose a slightly more dynamic pose for the next drawing, and I started to do the bad thing again. You can see me start to just absolutely fudge details about his battle collar because I was just eager to get it done, and I had to reel myself back in and remind myself this is meant to be a methodical study. So, I slowed down and figured out the schematics of how I imagined the battle collar working. I am no engineer by a long shot, mainly just fluffing it and going off of what will look nice, but making the proper turnaround helped a ton, and I'm very glad I took the time to do it. This way, when I'm drawing comic panels, I'm not stuck trying to redraw weird mechanical parts based off of a scuffed version I made at a weird angle once. Last but not least, I could not resist. I had to chibify him. In part because it's fun, but also it actually helped me see what traits are most important to me about his design. I feel that if all of his design choices can be simplified but still readable in a more simplistic style, it makes for a better design overall. Look at how grumpy he is! Aww. And so, here are all my final character study sheets. I'm not a professional. Maybe it shows, but gosh did these help me a ton. I'm way more excited about Viktor's new look now, and I hope this inspired other slackers like me to finally sit down and do the damn study. I do have at least one other original creature species from my comic I want to revamp, and perhaps I'll make a video about that process too. Okenta the editor here, that is hard to say. I started this to be a shorter, more chill video ages ago, then for 101 reasons it got delayed, so now we're here. But just to let you know, I have participated in my very first art fight this year, and I put my son up on the docket, and I got some super cool art of him that I love so very much, and I'm so very grateful for. Look at these! They make me go absolutely insane, and given the fact that these were randoms, I feel very happy that my son managed to snag some people I don't know. Their links are on screen and will also be in the description. Just a little shout out to them. I don't know if I'll be making any sort of art fight video, just wanted to shove even more Viktor in your face so maybe I can convince you how cool he is. Okay, bye! Thanks for sitting through all my scribbling and lore dumping, and hope you enjoyed the video. Also, if you have any other suggestions or tips about Viktor's design or character designing in general, leave a comment. I would actually be so interested to read them. Alright, thank you. Bye!